"Excuse me, but this clause is a trap," said the black maid. And the Mafia boss lost his smile. "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Emma's hands trembled as she carefully flipped through the pages of the contract, the one she had found in the office of the notorious Mafia boss, Vincenzo Romano. As a maid in his mansion, Emma had seen and heard many things, but this was different. She paused on a particular clause in the document. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized what she was looking at. It wasn't just a legal loophole. It was a trap. Emma's mind raced. She had to be sure. She read the clause again, her pulse quickening. The legal jargon was cleverly disguised, but Emma's sharp eyes caught the hidden danger. The Mafia boss, Vincenzo Romano, had signed away more than just his assets. This clause could ruin him. It could destroy everything he had worked for. As a maid in his mansion, Emma had no business poking around in his personal affairs, but when she stumbled upon this document by accident, she couldn't turn a blind eye. She knew what was at stake. She had to act, but the risk was enormous. If Romano found out she had seen the contract, there was no telling what he would do. The thought made her stomach churn. Still, Emma couldn't ignore it. She had seen enough in her life to recognize when someone was being taken advantage of. She needed to say something. She couldn't just stand by and let this happen. But how could she possibly confront a man like Vincenzo Romano? The man who ruled the Mafia with an iron fist, a man who could destroy anyone in his path without a second thought. He was dangerous, calculating, and unforgiving. Yet, Emma knew she had no choice. She had to warn him. Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. She couldn't keep quiet. It was time to speak up, even if it meant risking everything. Slowly, she walked toward the door of his office, the place she was never supposed to enter unless summoned. She had to be careful, calculating. One wrong move, and she would be gone, just another casualty in the underworld that surrounded him. Her fingers brushed the cold doorknob as she hesitated for a moment. She had no idea what would happen when she entered. Would he believe her? Would he lash out in anger? Or would he listen? She wasn't sure. But what she did know was that if she didn't act now, the consequences could be far worse. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Romano was sitting behind his massive desk, his back to her as he spoke on the phone in a language she couldn't understand. She could feel the tension in the room, the weight of his power pressing down on her. Emma stood silently for a moment, watching him as he continued his conversation. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. But she couldn't wait any longer. She had to do it now. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly. Romano's head snapped around, his dark eyes narrowing as they met hers. For a brief moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had his full attention now. "What is it, Maid?" His voice was cold, almost dismissive, but there was an edge to it. She took a step forward, trying to steady her nerves. "I've read the contract you signed. There's a clause in it. It's a trap, sir." Romano's expression froze. His eyes widened for a split second before his face returned to its usual stoic mask. He said nothing, but his gaze was intense, calculating. "A trap," he repeated slowly. Emma nodded, her heart racing in her chest. "Yes, sir. The clause is written in such a way that it gives the other party complete control over your assets. It's designed to ruin you, to strip you of everything you've built." She could feel the tension in the air as she spoke, but she held her ground. Romano stood up from his desk, his imposing figure towering over her. For a moment, Emma thought he might lash out, but instead, he just stared at her, in stunned silence. Then, something changed. His usual expression of cold indifference shifted, and for the first time, Emma saw a flicker of something else, something she hadn't expected. A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips, one that was almost imperceptible but undeniably there. The smile wasn't one of amusement. It wasn't mocking. It was something more complicated, something appreciative. Emma couldn't quite place it, but she felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't wrath. It was something else. Maybe it was respect. "You caught it, didn't you?" Romano said, his voice softer now. Emma nodded, still unsure of what was happening. He stepped closer, his gaze lingering on her. You just saved my empire, he added quietly. Emma blinked in shock. What? She whispered, unable to comprehend what he was saying. Romano chuckled softly, his expression now warmer than she had ever seen. You didn't just read a contract, Maid. You read between the lines. You saw the trap before I did. And for that, you've earned something. You've earned my respect. His words were a revelation, one that she hadn't expected. In that moment, everything changed. The powerful Mafia boss, the man who had ruled with an iron fist, was no longer the same. And neither was Emma. The room was still. The weight of Vincenzo Romano's gaze hung in the air as Emma stood there, still trying to process what had just happened. A Mafia boss, a man feared by many, had just thanked her. No, more than that. He had respected her. A maid. She had caught something that could have cost him everything, and now, for the first time since she'd started working in his mansion, she saw him in a different light. Vincenzo's usual cold demeanor had softened, replaced by a hint of something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. He studied her for a moment longer, then finally spoke. I'm impressed. You've got sharp eyes, Emma. You're not just here to clean. You see things most people miss. That's a rare quality. Emma was taken aback. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, certainly not someone like him. She wasn't sure how to respond. Was he mocking her? Testing her? Or did he truly mean it? His expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that told her it was real. A flicker of something she hadn't seen before. But before she could say anything, Vincenzo's voice broke the silence again. You've done more than just save my empire, Emma. You've earned my trust. And that's not something I give away lightly. Emma swallowed hard. Trust. A word she had never expected to hear from him. But she didn't have time to dwell on it. He wasn't finished. I'm going to need someone like you by my side, he continued. Someone who notices the details. Someone who doesn't shy away from the truth. His words were like a challenge, but Emma wasn't sure how to meet it. She had never thought of herself as someone who could offer more than just cleaning, but now, she was beginning to wonder. Maybe there was more to her life than she realized. Vincenzo leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. You're not just a maid here. You're something more. His words made Emma feel a strange mixture of pride and unease. She was used to being invisible, to being just a background presence in a world full of wealth and power. But now, for the first time, she was seen. Truly seen. I want you to stay, Vincenzo said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. Not just to clean. I need someone like you to help me with something important. Emma's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment she had dreaded. What could he possibly want from her? You've seen how things work around here, he continued. You've seen the deals, the contracts, the power plays. You've been paying attention, haven't you? Emma hesitated for a moment. He was right. She had seen things she probably shouldn't have. But she had always kept her head down, never questioning, just doing her job. But now, everything was different. I want you to stay, Emma, Vincenzo repeated. I need someone I can trust to handle things when I'm not around. Someone who won't hesitate to speak up when something's wrong. Someone who can spot the traps before they're sprung. Emma felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. This was the chance she had never dared to imagine. A chance to step out of the shadows, to be more than just a maid. But it also terrified her. She had seen what happened to people who crossed him. What would he do to her if she made a mistake? What if she couldn't handle the pressure? But as she looked into his eyes, something shifted. She had always been strong, even if no one else had ever seen it. Maybe it was time for her to see it, too. Vincenzo leaned forward, his voice lowering. I'm giving you a choice, Emma. You can stay here and be part of something bigger than you ever imagined. Or you can leave and never look back. The choice seemed simple, but Emma knew it wasn't. Her mind raced as she thought about her life, about everything she had worked for. But deep down, she knew what she had to do. She wasn't the kind of person who could walk away from something that could change her life. She wasn't the kind of person who could just stay in the shadows anymore. I'll stay, she said, her voice steady, despite the whirlwind inside her. Vincenzo's lips curved into a faint smile, one that held both approval and something more. Good, he said, his voice like silk. You've just made a very important decision, Emma. And I think you'll find that your life is about to change in ways you never expected. Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made her choice. But as Vincenzo rose from his chair and moved toward the door, she couldn't help but wonder just how much her life would change, and if she was ready for it. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Emma standing in the stillness of the room. For the first time since she had stepped into the mansion, she felt like she was no longer invisible. She was something more, something important, and there was no going back now. Emma's heart raced as she stood in the grand hallway of the Romano mansion. The heavy silence was only broken by the sound of her own footsteps, echoing in the vast space. Vincenzo had just given her the most incredible opportunity of her life. For years, she had worked in the shadows, invisible to the world, but now, everything was about to change. She was no longer just a maid. She had earned the trust of a mafia boss, and with that came a responsibility she wasn't sure she was prepared for. Yet, she couldn't deny the feeling of power that stirred within her. The decision to stay had been easy in the moment, but now, as she stood there in the stillness, she realized the gravity of what she had agreed to. Vincenzo's words echoed in her mind. "You've earned my trust. You've earned my respect." She had never imagined that those words would be directed at her. The woman who had always kept her head down, who had learned to blend into the background, had now stepped into the spotlight. But with that spotlight came dangers she hadn't fully considered. Vincenzo's world was not a safe one. She had seen glimpses of the ruthless side of him, the cold, calculating boss who could make decisions that changed lives in an instant. And now, she was a part of that world. As she walked through the mansion, her mind whirred with the possibilities. What exactly did Vincenzo expect from her? What role would she play in this intricate web of power, money, and danger? She wasn't sure, but she knew that she couldn't back out now. She had already made the decision to stay. The door to Vincenzo's office was slightly ajar, and Emma hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. Inside, Vincenzo was sitting behind his massive desk, his eyes fixed on a set of documents. He didn't look up when she entered, but she could feel his attention on her as she approached. "You're here," he said, his voice low and steady. "I've been thinking about what we talked about earlier. I have something I need you to do." Emma's pulse quickened. "What is it, sir?" She tried to keep her voice steady, but inside, her mind was racing. "I need you to help me with something delicate," Vincenzo said, still not looking up from the papers in front of him. "There's a situation that needs your attention. It's complicated, but I think you're the right person for it." Emma's mind raced. What could this possibly be? She had always kept to her role as a maid, cleaning, serving, staying out of the way. But now, Vincenzo was asking her to do something more. Something important. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo finally looked up at her, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "There are people who want to take what I've built. They're using legal loopholes, false accusations, anything they can to tear down my empire. I need someone who can spot the lies before they become problems. Someone who can read between the lines and figure out who's really behind it all." Emma's heart pounded. Was this really happening? Was she about to become involved in something that dangerous? But as she stood there, looking into Vincenzo's eyes, she realized that this was what she had been waiting for. This was her chance to prove that she was more than just a maid. She was sharp. She was capable. And she could do this. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm now. Vincenzo's lips curled into a small smile, though it was more of a nod of approval than a sign of warmth. "I knew you would," he said. "I'll give you all the information you need. You'll have access to everything, my lawyers, my staff, the documents. But you'll have to be careful. This isn't something you can do half-heartedly. People's lives are at stake." The weight of his words hit her like a brick, but Emma didn't flinch. She had made her decision. She wasn't going to back down now. "I understand," she replied. "I won't let you down." Vincenzo nodded again, standing up from his desk. "Good," he said. "We start tomorrow. I'll brief you on everything you need to know. But remember, Emma, once you step into this world, there's no turning back. You'll see things, hear things, things that will change you. You have to be prepared for that." Emma nodded. She had known this wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. "I'm ready," she said. Vincenzo's eyes softened, just for a moment, before he turned back to the papers on his desk. "We'll see. Tomorrow, we begin." Emma left his office, her mind racing with the weight of what had just happened. This was it. She was no longer just a maid. She was about to enter a world of power, danger, and intrigue, and she couldn't wait to see where it would take her. The next day, Emma found herself in the heart of Vincenzo Romano's empire. The mansion was a fortress, not just in its physical structure but in the way it operated. Its own world, its own rules. Emma had never been this deep into the Mafia's inner workings, and as she walked through the polished hallways, she couldn't help but feel the weight of what she had agreed to. She had no idea how far things would go or what she was about to face, but her resolve remained unshaken. Vincenzo had told her to be careful, and she knew he was right. Everything she did from this point on could change her life forever. Today, she was supposed to meet with one of his top lawyers, someone who had been in the business long enough to know the ins and outs of legal battles that went beyond ordinary law. As she approached the office, the door opened, and a tall, sharp-dressed man stepped out. His eyes met hers with a calculating look, his face expressionless. "You must be Emma," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Vincenzo has spoken highly of you." Emma nodded, trying to keep her composure. She had no idea what Vincenzo had said, but she wasn't about to let this man see her uncertainty. "Yes, I'm Emma," she said, extending her hand. "I'm here to help with the situation." The lawyer gave a small, polite smile and shook her hand. "I'm Michael, Vincenzo's legal advisor. Come on in, let's get started." Inside the office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The walls were lined with books, shelves crammed with legal documents and case files. Michael motioned for her to sit across from his desk, and Emma did so, her nerves on edge. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do here, but she was determined to figure it out. "So, Vincenzo says you've got sharp eyes," Michael began, settling into his chair. "That's good, because we've got a mess to clean up. A lot of people are trying to take down Romano Enterprises, and they've been very clever about it." Emma leaned forward slightly, her curiosity piqued. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Michael's eyes hardened, and he opened a file on his desk. A series of corporate takeovers disguised as legitimate acquisitions. "There's a hidden agenda behind these deals, and if we don't catch it in time, we could lose everything. The legal traps are so well crafted, even the best lawyers miss them." Emma could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This was bigger than anything she had imagined. But the more she listened, the more her confidence grew. She had spent her life watching the world from the sidelines, but this was her chance to step in and make a real difference. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady. Michael studied her for a moment, then nodded as if he had made up his mind. "We need someone who can look at this from a different angle. You're not a lawyer, and that's actually an advantage. We've been stuck in the legal jargon for so long, but you—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You see things differently. You have an intuition about people and situations. That's what we need." Emma's heart raced. She had spent her life feeling invisible, always in the background, but now, for the first time, her instincts were being acknowledged. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was part of something far bigger. "I'll do my best," she said, feeling the weight of her words. Michael gave a small smile. "I'm sure you will. Let's start with this document." He pushed a thick stack of papers toward her, each page filled with dense legal terms and figures. Emma picked it up, her fingers tracing the lines of text. It was overwhelming at first, but something about it caught her attention. She turned to Michael. "These numbers don't add up," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Michael looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "There's an inconsistency in the figures here," Emma explained, pointing to a section of the document. "It looks like the payment schedule is off. It's not the numbers that matter. It's the timing. Whoever is behind this is trying to hide something. They're waiting for a specific moment to make their move." Michael leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he examined the pages she had pointed to. "You're right. How did you catch that?" Emma shrugged, not wanting to make a big deal of it. "I've always been good at noticing the small details." Michael nodded, clearly impressed. "Vincenzo wasn't wrong about you. That's exactly what we need." The next few hours were a blur of papers, phone calls, and meetings. Emma was thrust into a world she had never known, one that was filled with danger and high stakes. But as she worked alongside Michael, her confidence grew. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She was making a difference. As the day wore on, Emma began to understand the gravity of what she was involved in. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that the people behind the plot to take down Vincenzo's empire were calculating and ruthless. But she wasn't afraid. She had a role to play now, and she would do whatever it took to protect the life she was building. Later that evening, as she sat in her small office in the mansion, reviewing the documents, Vincenzo appeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching her. Finally, he spoke. "I told you this wasn't going to be easy," he said quietly. "But you've done well, Emma. Keep going." His words were simple, but they meant everything. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a part of this world, and she was in it for the long haul. Emma sat in the dimly lit room, her fingers drumming nervously on the edge of the desk as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. The papers before her were filled with complex numbers and legal terms. But the one thing she had learned from her time working with Vincenzo Romano was that it was not just about what was written, it was about what was being hidden. Every line, every clause, every term was a puzzle piece, and she had to figure out where they fit. As she sifted through the documents, her mind raced, calculating, analyzing, trying to see the bigger picture. Vincenzo had placed a great deal of trust in her, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had the power to make a real difference. The sun had long set, but Emma was still working in the quiet solitude of the mansion. She was alone, save for the occasional footsteps of the guards patrolling the hallways outside. The silence felt oppressive, but Emma had learned to embrace it. It was in these moments of stillness that she could focus, truly think. As she flipped through the pages, her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Michael, Vincenzo's legal advisor. "We need to meet. Bring everything you've got. Tomorrow." Emma frowned. The urgency in his message made her stomach tighten. She had been making progress, but she knew there was more to uncover. She couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it became. Just as she was about to gather the documents and head out, the door to her office creaked open, and Vincenzo stepped inside. She looked up, startled. His presence was commanding as always, but today, there was something different in his eyes. He wasn't the cold, distant Mafia boss she had come to know. Instead, there was an intensity in his gaze, a flicker of something softer beneath the surface. "I see you've been busy," he said, his voice low but filled with a strange warmth. Emma nodded, still not sure how to react. She had learned a lot from him in the past few days, about power, about loyalty, and about trust. But there was still so much she didn't understand. "I'm almost ready," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at her insides. "I've been going through everything you gave me. I think I'm starting to see the patterns." Vincenzo stepped closer, his eyes scanning the documents laid out on the desk. "You've done well," he said quietly. "But I think we both know this is just the beginning. The people who are after me, after us, they won't stop. And they'll do whatever it takes to get what they want." Emma's heart pounded at the weight of his words. She had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing it from Vincenzo made it all the more real. "I know," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I won't back down." Vincenzo looked at her for a long moment, his gaze intense. For a second, Emma thought he might say something else, something more, but instead, he simply nodded. "I trust you, Emma," he said, his voice low. "I need you to keep going. Whatever it takes, you find out who's behind this. And don't trust anyone who comes into your path." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but she didn't show it. She couldn't. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. "I won't," she said firmly. "I'll finish this." Vincenzo paused, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment longer before he turned toward the door. "Good," he said, his voice now carrying that familiar tone of command. "I'll be in touch." And Emma? She looked up at him, waiting for him to finish. He turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Be careful. You're playing in a world that doesn't play by the same rules." And with that, he was gone, leaving Emma alone in the room once again. But now, more than ever, Emma knew what she had to do. She couldn't back down, not when so much was at stake. She had seen too much, learned too much, to just walk away. As the hours passed, Emma worked tirelessly through the night, piecing together the clues that Vincenzo had entrusted her with. The documents, the phone calls, the hidden messages, all of it was starting to make sense. But as the puzzle began to take shape, Emma's unease grew. She had uncovered a name, someone who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. But that name, she realized, was one she hadn't expected. It was someone close to Vincenzo's inner circle, someone she had trusted, someone who had been playing a dangerous game of their own. Emma felt a chill creep up her spine. She wasn't just facing a legal battle anymore. She was staring down a conspiracy, a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal that reached deeper than she could have ever imagined. The real test was just beginning, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to stop now. Whatever it took, she would get to the truth, no matter the cost. Emma sat in her small office, her eyes fixed on the documents scattered before her. The name she had uncovered, the name that had sent a chill down her spine, was Giovanni DeMarco, Vincenzo's longtime associate, trusted by the Mafia boss himself. Emma had never suspected Giovanni. To her, he had always been just another member of the Mafia's inner circle, the kind of man who moved through the shadows without drawing attention. But now, everything she thought she knew about him was unraveling. The truth was right there in front of her. Giovanni had been orchestrating a series of moves designed to take down Vincenzo's empire from the inside. He had used his position to manipulate the legal battles, turning them into a weapon that would destroy everything Vincenzo had built. Emma's mind raced as she pieced together the clues. She had been working tirelessly for days, but this was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. Giovanni had been feeding information to their rivals, passing along key details about Vincenzo's operations. He had been playing both sides, pretending to be loyal while slowly sabotaging everything. Emma felt a mix of disbelief and anger. She had trusted Giovanni. She had seen him as part of the family, someone who had always been there, working behind the scenes to support Vincenzo. How could he betray them like this? The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how dangerous Giovanni had become. He wasn't just trying to take down Vincenzo. He was trying to take down everything, to control the entire operation for himself. And now, it was up to Emma to stop him. She couldn't let him get away with it. She couldn't let him destroy the man who had given her a chance, who had trusted her when no one else did. She knew she had to act fast. Vincenzo had no idea what was happening, and once Giovanni made his move, it would be too late. But Emma wasn't afraid. She had already proven to herself that she could handle whatever came her way. She had seen the darker side of the world she had stepped into, and she was ready for the fight. As she sat there, her fingers hovering over the phone, she knew what she had to do. She needed to tell Vincenzo. She needed to warn him before Giovanni made his next move. But how could she do that? How could she possibly convince Vincenzo that one of his most trusted allies was a traitor? The weight of the decision pressed down on her. She had no choice. She had to trust Vincenzo. She had to believe that he would understand, that he would act before it was too late. With a deep breath, she picked up the phone and dialed Vincenzo's number. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. "Emma," he said, his voice calm but alert. "What is it?" Emma hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with the words she needed to say. "Vincenzo, I found something. Something important," she said, her voice steady despite the urgency she felt. "It's Giovanni. He's been working against you. He's been feeding information to our enemies, trying to bring down everything you've built." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Emma could hear Vincenzo breathing, the silence between them heavy with tension. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low, but filled with disbelief. "I'm sure," Emma replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've been going through the documents, the contracts, and everything points to him. He's been playing both sides, Vincenzo. He's been setting you up, trying to take control of your empire." Vincenzo was quiet for a moment, and Emma could hear the wheels turning in his head. "I'll take care of it," he said finally, his voice cold and determined. "You did the right thing, Emma. I'll make sure Giovanni pays for his betrayal." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had warned him. She had stopped Giovanni before it was too late. But even as she felt the weight of the moment lift, a new fear settled in her chest. This was just the beginning. Vincenzo's empire was about to face a new kind of danger, one from within. And Emma knew that if she was going to survive, she had to be ready for whatever came next. Vincenzo's voice broke through her thoughts. "I need you to stay close, Emma. I'll have more work for you. We can't let our guard down now." Emma nodded, even though she knew he couldn't see her. "I'll be ready," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever it takes." The call ended, and Emma sat there, the phone still pressed to her ear. For a moment, she just listened to the silence. It was over. Giovanni's betrayal had been exposed, and Vincenzo would deal with him. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The stakes were higher now, and the enemies they faced were closer than ever. She had made the right choice in warning Vincenzo, But now she was part of something much bigger than herself. And she would need all the strength, courage, and cunning she had to see this through. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a player in a dangerous game, and she wasn't going to lose. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. Vincenzo had already taken swift action to remove Giovanni from the equation, but Emma could feel the storm brewing. She had uncovered a dangerous betrayal, but the fallout was far from over. She had done what was needed. She had exposed Giovanni's treachery, but the battle was only beginning. Vincenzo trusted her now more than ever, and she knew that with that trust came greater responsibility. She couldn't afford to fail. As she sat at her desk in the mansion, reviewing more documents, the weight of her new role started to sink in. This was no longer just about cleaning or serving. She had become a key player in a game of power, deception, and loyalty. Vincenzo's empire was under siege, and it was up to her to help protect it. A knock at the door startled her. She looked up to see Michael, the legal advisor, standing in the doorway. His expression was serious, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a hint of urgency. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside. Emma straightened in her chair, her mind racing. "What's going on?" Michael didn't waste time with pleasantries. "There's been a shift in the balance of power. Giovanni wasn't the only one trying to take Vincenzo down. We've uncovered a deeper plot, one that goes beyond just corporate sabotage. Someone is working within our own ranks to destabilize everything." Emma's stomach dropped. She had expected trouble, but not this. "Who?" she asked, her voice tight. Michael hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting to the documents on her desk. "We don't know yet, but we're getting closer. The evidence is pointing toward a group within Vincenzo's closest circle, people he trusts." Emma's mind raced. This was worse than she had imagined. Giovanni was just the tip of the iceberg. "What do we do?" she asked, trying to steady her nerves. Michael leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "We need to find out who's behind this before it's too late. And we need to be careful. The people we're dealing with are dangerous, and they've got resources we don't fully understand." Emma nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me what to do." Michael studied her for a moment, then handed her a file. "I've compiled everything we know so far. We need to go through it, find the inconsistencies, and figure out who's pulling the strings. But this isn't going to be easy. There are risks." Emma didn't hesitate. "I'm in." Michael gave a small, approving nod. "Good. I knew Vincenzo made the right choice." The next few hours were a blur of analysis, strategy, and uncertainty. Emma pored over the files, cross-referencing every detail with the information she had gathered. The more she dug, the clearer it became that the conspiracy went deeper than she could have imagined. It wasn't just about corporate takeovers or legal manipulation. It was about control. Someone was trying to seize power, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. As the night wore on, Emma's eyes grew heavy, but she refused to stop. She had come too far to back out now. There was no going back. She had to finish this. Just as she was about to take a break, her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Vincenzo. "Meet me in my office. Now." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what this was about, but she knew it couldn't be good. She gathered the files and made her way to his office, her mind racing. When she arrived, Vincenzo was standing by the window, his back to her. The mood in the room was tense, the air thick with anticipation. "You wanted to see me?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Vincenzo turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "I know you've been working hard, Emma. You've proven yourself. But we need to have a serious conversation." Emma felt a wave of unease wash over her. "What about?" Vincenzo walked toward her, his gaze intense. "The people trying to bring me down. I've trusted you to help us through this. But there's something you need to know." Emma swallowed hard, her palms suddenly clammy. "What is it?" Vincenzo's voice was calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it. "I know who's behind it all. It's not just some rogue players or rivals trying to take us down. It's someone much closer than that." Emma's mind raced. Could it be someone she knew? Someone she had trusted? "Who?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo's eyes narrowed, and he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's someone in my family." Emma froze. This was beyond anything she had expected. If Vincenzo's family was involved, then things were much worse than she had imagined. "Who?" she repeated, her voice trembling. Vincenzo's gaze hardened. "My brother, Marco. He's been playing both sides. working against me from the inside. I've known for a while, but I didn't want to believe it. Emma's stomach churned. Marco Romano, Vincenzo's brother, the very person who should have been his closest ally, was the traitor. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely audible. Vincenzo's expression was cold, his usual composure slipping for just a moment. We confront him, and we make sure this ends, once and for all. I'm not going to let him destroy everything I've built. Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined this turn of events, but she knew one thing for sure. Things were about to get much more dangerous. The stakes were higher than ever, and she had to be ready for whatever came next. Emma couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in her chest as she walked through the dimly lit halls of the Romano mansion. Vincenzo had confirmed her worst fears. His own brother, Marco, was behind the plot to bring him down. The weight of the revelation felt like a heavy stone pressing down on her, and she couldn't help but wonder how far Marco had gone. The more she thought about it, the more the situation seemed like a nightmare that wasn't going to end. But there was no turning back now. She had to face the truth, and she had to do it head-on. As she walked into Vincenzo's office, he was standing by the window, his back to her as he looked out over the city. He had been unusually quiet since their last conversation, his face set in a hard, determined expression. He didn't turn around when she entered, but she could feel the tension in the air. "We need to talk," Vincenzo said, his voice low and steady. Emma stepped forward, her heart pounding. "About Marco?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo turned slowly, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "Yes," he replied, his tone hard. "We need to confront him, but we need to be careful. Marco is no fool. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's been playing us all for years." Emma's mind raced as she processed his words. Marco had always been the more charismatic of the Romano brothers, the one who could charm anyone with his smile. She had never seen him as a threat, but now, everything was different. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. Vincenzo looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. "We gather everything we have on him. We can't confront him without solid evidence. I'll handle the rest, but I need you to find out everything he's been hiding." Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. She had already proven herself capable, and this was no different. She would find the answers. She had to. Over the next few hours, Emma worked tirelessly, sifting through the stacks of documents, cross-referencing everything she could find. Marco had been careful, covering his tracks, but there were cracks in the facade. As she dug deeper, Emma began to piece together the puzzle. Marco had been feeding information to their enemies, but it wasn't just about money or power. There was something personal in his betrayal, something that went deeper than anyone had realized. As the pieces began to fit together, Emma's stomach churned. The more she uncovered, the more she realized just how far Marco was willing to go to take everything from Vincenzo. This wasn't just a power grab, it was a fight for control, and Marco was willing to destroy anyone who got in his way. Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt gnawing at her. She had trusted Marco, had believed in his loyalty to Vincenzo, just like everyone else. But now she saw the truth. Marco wasn't the man they thought he was. He was a traitor. She pushed the thoughts aside as she focused on the evidence in front of her. She had to keep moving forward. She had to be strong for Vincenzo. Hours passed, and Emma was no closer to finding Marco's real motives. But then, as she flipped through a set of financial records, something caught her eye. A series of transactions, all linked to an account she didn't recognize. She quickly pulled up the details, her heart racing as she processed the information. The account was tied to a rival Mafia family, one that had been a thorn in Vincenzo's side for years. But there was more. The transactions had been made from within the mansion itself. Someone on the inside was helping Marco, someone he could trust. Emma's mind raced as the pieces finally clicked into place. Marco hadn't just been working against Vincenzo. He had been manipulating the people closest to him, using their loyalty against them. But who could he trust enough to help him? Who had been aiding him from the inside? Emma's breath caught in her throat as she realized the answer. It wasn't just Marco who had betrayed Vincenzo. There was someone else involved, someone who had been playing both sides all along. She rushed to pull up the records on the staff, her fingers trembling as she sifted through the names. The answer was right in front of her. It was someone she knew, someone she had trusted. Michael, the legal advisor. He had been working with Marco, feeding him the information he needed to take Vincenzo down. Emma's heart sank as the realization hit her. Michael had been using her all along. He had played her, made her think she was helping Vincenzo, while all the time, he had been working with Marco to bring everything crashing down. She had been a pawn in their game, but now, she had the power to change it. With the evidence in hand, Emma knew what she had to do. She couldn't confront Michael alone. She needed to bring Vincenzo in on this. But as she stood up, ready to make the call, a knock on the door made her freeze. She turned slowly, her heart pounding as she tried to steady her breath. The door creaked open, and Vincenzo stepped inside. His eyes locked onto hers, a dark intensity in his gaze. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Emma's pulse quickened as she realized that everything she had uncovered had led to this moment. Marco's betrayal was only the beginning. The real enemy was standing right in front of her, and she wasn't sure she was ready for what was about to happen next. Vincenzo's presence in the doorway froze Emma in place. His eyes, once filled with determination and resolve, now bore a coldness she had never seen before. His body language radiated power, but something about his gaze made Emma's pulse quicken. She couldn't help but wonder if he knew the truth. Had he found out about Michael? Was this the moment everything unraveled? She felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she stood there, silently weighing her options. She could not back down now. She had come this far. But how would Vincenzo react to the truth about his closest advisor? "We need to talk," Vincenzo repeated, his voice low and measured. Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had known this moment would come, but she had hoped it would be under different circumstances. Still, she couldn't afford to hesitate. If Vincenzo had truly been betrayed by Michael, she had to be the one to expose it. "About Michael?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincenzo took a step inside the room, the door clicking shut behind him. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though he were calculating his next words. "Yes," he said, his tone sharp. "We need to confront him, but we need to be careful." Emma nodded, her thoughts racing. The weight of Vincenzo's words hung in the air. She had been right to suspect Michael, but now the moment of truth was upon them. What would happen next? Could she trust Vincenzo to handle it? Or was she about to be swept into something far darker? "I know about the transactions," Emma said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "Michael's been sending information to Marco." Vincenzo's gaze softened just a fraction, and he let out a long breath. "I suspected as much," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "But the question is, how long has this been going on?" Emma hesitated. She had uncovered the depth of Michael's betrayal, but the full extent of it still shocked her. "It's been going on for months," she said, her voice quieter now. "Marco's been pulling the strings, using Michael to get to you. The transactions, they were all part of a plan to weaken your position, to take control." Vincenzo's expression hardened, his jaw tightening in anger. "I should have seen this coming," he muttered to himself, more to the room than to her. Emma couldn't deny the feeling of unease that washed over her. Vincenzo had always been so careful, so calculating in his moves, but Michael's betrayal had blindsided him. He had trusted him with so much, and now that trust was shattered. "What do we do now?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. Vincenzo's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, she saw something different in them. A vulnerability she hadn't expected from the man who had built an empire with his bare hands. But then, the cold mask slipped back into place. "We take control," he said, his voice firm and commanding. "We expose Michael for what he truly is. We make sure Marco knows that. We know. And we protect what's mine, what's ours." Emma nodded, feeling a surge of determination. This was no longer just about loyalty or trust. It was about survival. Vincenzo's empire, his legacy, was under threat, and she had a role to play in protecting it. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady with resolve. Vincenzo regarded her for a long moment, his gaze piercing. "I know you will, Emma," he said quietly. "That's why I trust you." Emma's heart skipped a beat at his words. Trust. It had always been a rare commodity in Vincenzo's world. She had earned it, and now, she would do whatever it took to prove she was worthy of it. "We'll need to move fast," Vincenzo continued, his voice low with purpose. "We can't let Michael know we're onto him. We'll use him to get to Marco. It's time to end this game." The plan was set in motion quickly. Vincenzo summoned his most trusted men, and together, they devised a strategy to confront Michael without tipping him off. Emma worked in the background, her mind focused, her every action deliberate. She had no time for doubts now. The pieces were in place. It was time to take action. The following days were a blur of secret meetings and covert operations. Michael had no idea what was coming, and Vincenzo's men worked silently to gather the final pieces of the puzzle. Emma kept her distance, watching, waiting. It was the calm before the storm. Then, the moment arrived. Vincenzo called Emma into his office. His face was unreadable as he looked at her. "It's time," he said simply. They would meet Michael in a secure location, one that no one could trace. The confrontation would be swift, final. Emma's heart raced as she followed Vincenzo down the hall, the weight of what was about to happen settling in. Would this be the end of it? Or was it just the beginning of something far more dangerous? As they reached the meeting room, Vincenzo paused. He turned to her, his eyes locking onto hers. "Stay close," he said, his voice low but firm. "This is it. No turning back." Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. She had come too far to back down now. As the door opened, Vincenzo stepped inside, and Emma followed. The confrontation had begun. The room was cold, the air heavy with tension as Vincenzo led Emma into the starkly lit meeting space. The quiet hum of the mansion outside felt distant, a world away from the seriousness of what was about to unfold. Michael was already there, his figure looming by the window, looking out over the city below. The faint city lights reflected in his eyes, but there was no warmth in his gaze. He turned when he heard their footsteps, his face immediately going from casual indifference to the slightest hint of something darker as he met Vincenzo's eyes. "Vincenzo," Michael said, his voice smooth, but there was an edge to it. "I didn't expect you to show up so soon." Vincenzo didn't answer right away. His silence stretched in the room like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Emma stood slightly behind him, her heart racing as she tried to read the room. She had never seen Vincenzo like this, cold, calculating, his usual calm replaced with a quiet storm. "I know everything, Michael," Vincenzo said, his voice low, the words carrying more weight than any shout could have. Michael blinked, a quick flash of surprise flickering across his face before he masked it again with that same easy smile. "Everything?" he asked, his tone laced with disbelief, though his eyes flicked toward Emma for just a fraction of a second. She could see the subtle shift in his posture, the slight tension in his shoulders. He knew she knew. "About the transactions. About you feeding information to Marco. About your plan to destroy my empire." Michael's smile faded, his mask cracking, just for a moment. "You're mistaken, Vincenzo," he said, his voice suddenly sharper, more defensive. "I've been loyal to you always." "What are you talking about?" Vincenzo took a step forward, his presence imposing. Emma could feel the power of it, the way it filled the room, pressing down on everyone. "I'm talking about everything," Vincenzo said, his words deliberate. The deals with our enemies, the way you've been undermining everything I've worked for, all the while pretending to be my ally." Michael's lips tightened, his jaw clenched. For a moment, Emma thought he might lash out, but then something shifted in his eyes. A calm, cold calculation took over, and he straightened, stepping away from the window. "You think you know everything, but you don't," Michael said, his voice gaining an icy edge. "You've always been too focused on the business, too blind to see what's really going on around you." He stepped closer to Vincenzo, his voice dropping lower, as if sharing a secret. "The truth is, you're weak, Vincenzo. And your empire? It's crumbling. I've been trying to save you from yourself." Vincenzo's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as Michael's words hung in the air. There was no fear in Vincenzo's gaze, no hesitation. "You think betraying me is going to save me?" Vincenzo's voice was ice now, a dangerous calm settling over him. "You've been trying to take everything from me, everything I've built. And now, you're going to pay for it." Michael's face twisted into something between a smile and a sneer. "You can't stop this, Vincenzo. You never could. The world is changing, and you're too stubborn to see it." The air in the room seemed to thicken, the silence pressing down like a physical weight. Emma watched, frozen, as the tension between the two men thickened. She had seen Vincenzo in all his calculated power, but here, in this moment, she realized just how dangerous he truly was. "You're right about one thing," Vincenzo said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. The world is changing, but I'm not going down without a fight. Vincenzo moved, swift and precise, his eyes never leaving Michael's. Emma barely had time to react as Vincenzo reached into his jacket, pulling out a small device, handing it over to Michael with a cold, deliberate motion. This is for your information, Michael, Vincenzo said. The truth you've been hiding, the people you've been playing, they'll know everything now. Your empire will crumble. Michael's eyes darted to the device, his calm facade cracking for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. He laughed softly, the sound empty and hollow. You think this will work? You're too late, Vincenzo. You don't have the power you once did. Vincenzo didn't flinch. That's where you're wrong, he said, his voice colder than ever. I never lost it. But now, it's time for you to face the consequences. Michael's eyes flickered with something. Fear, perhaps, or realization, but he quickly masked it. He stepped back, trying to regain control of the situation, but Vincenzo was already steps ahead. Emma could feel the tension in the air, the storm that had been brewing between them, now reaching its peak. Vincenzo had laid his cards on the table. Michael had been exposed, his plan unraveled, and now, there was nothing left to hide. Vincenzo's gaze remained fixed on Michael, but Emma could see the storm in his eyes, the fire that would consume anyone who dared betray him. She had seen this side of him before, but now it felt different. The stakes were higher than ever. She had chosen her side, and there was no turning back now. Michael was no longer the trusted advisor. He was the enemy, and Vincenzo would stop at nothing to destroy him. Michael's expression had gone from cold confidence to something darker, something almost desperate. Vincenzo's unwavering composure was like a force that pushed against the very air in the room. Michael stood frozen, staring at the device in his hand, but the faint tremor in his fingers told a different story than the bravado he tried to project. He was losing control. Vincenzo watched him closely, and Emma could feel the shift in the room's energy. This was the moment everything hinged on. There was no going back now. You think you can take me down just like that? Michael finally spoke, his voice tight, but still laced with defiance. Vincenzo's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained as calm as ever. You've already taken yourself down, Michael. All I had to do was pull the thread, and everything unraveled. You've been feeding information to our rivals, working from the inside, and for what? Money? Power. Michael's lips twisted into a humorless smile. You never understood, Vincenzo. It's never been just about money or power. It's about freedom. Freedom from this world you've built, the one you think you control. The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She had never considered that Michael, always so poised and professional, could have been after more than just wealth or status. Vincenzo didn't react immediately. He took a step closer to Michael, his gaze intense, his presence overpowering. You've always been close to me, Vincenzo said quietly, trusted by me. And yet, you've been lying to my face, betraying everything I stand for. You have no idea what true freedom is. You never did. Michael's jaw clenched, but he didn't back down. I gave up everything for this, he hissed, his eyes flickering with something unspoken. I played the game, built your empire, and what did I get in return? A cage. You think you have it all under control, but you're just a puppet like the rest of us. Emma felt the tension in the air rise, thick as a storm cloud. The weight of Michael's words lingered, but there was no turning back now. Vincenzo was already moving, his hands reaching into his jacket for the papers he had prepared. You're wrong, Vincenzo said, his voice quiet but deadly. You chose your path, Michael. And now, you'll face the consequences. The sound of paper being slid across the table filled the silence. Michael didn't even look at the documents. He knew what they were. The evidence. The proof. His eyes flicked to Vincenzo one last time, the expression on his face a mix of resignation and anger. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low. This is bigger than you. Bigger than both of us. Vincenzo didn't flinch. This is over. You're finished, Michael. I've already made my decision. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of Michael's breath, a deep, steady exhale, as if he were accepting his fate. You've always been so sure of yourself, Michael said, a dark edge creeping into his voice. You never saw it coming, did you? What's coming next? Emma's pulse quickened. She could sense something was off. The calm in Michael's voice was unsettling, too controlled for someone who was being exposed for their betrayal. Before she could react, the door to the room slammed open with a force that made her jump. In an instant, the tension in the room multiplied tenfold. A man, tall and imposing, stood in the doorway. His eyes immediately locked onto Michael. Emma could barely comprehend the situation as it unfolded. A second man followed closely behind, both of them wearing dark suits and expressions that screamed danger. Vincenzo didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. "What is this?" Emma asked, her voice tight. Vincenzo's eyes never left the man who had entered the room. "Back up," he said simply. "You didn't think Michael would play fair, did you?" Emma's mind raced, the weight of the situation now dawning on her. Michael wasn't alone in this. He had brought others with him. Vincenzo's empire was being attacked from all sides, and the betrayal ran deeper than she could have imagined. The men who had just entered the room had the same cold, calculating demeanor as Michael. It was clear that this wasn't just a confrontation, it was a warning. Michael hadn't just been feeding information to their enemies. He had been preparing for war. "You don't have to do this, Vincenzo," Michael said, his voice almost pleading, as if he had accepted the inevitable but still hoped for a way out. "You've made your choice, Michael," Vincenzo replied, his voice unwavering. "And now, it's time to pay for it." The two men behind Michael moved forward, one of them grabbing Michael by the arm. There was no fight, no resistance. It was over. But Emma couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. She had seen the way Michael had spoken earlier, the way he had acted like someone with a secret. As the men began to drag Michael out of the room, Vincenzo turned to Emma. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice firm. She nodded, though her mind was racing. What was happening? Who else was involved? This wasn't over. It couldn't be. Emma knew Vincenzo had just won a battle, but the war was far from finished. She could feel it in her bones. There were more players involved. And this time, Vincenzo's enemies were closer than ever before. The room was eerily silent as Michael was led out, the heavy footsteps of the men echoing down the hall. Emma stood still, her heart racing, unable to shake the unease that had settled over her since the moment Vincenzo had opened the door. The confrontation was far from over. Vincenzo's empire had just suffered a betrayal of the highest order, and the weight of the consequences hung heavily in the air. She had thought they were getting closer to the truth, but now, she realized they were only scratching the surface. Michael had been the tip of the iceberg. Whoever was truly behind this was still out there, watching, waiting. Vincenzo turned to her, his expression unreadable, his eyes sharp and calculating. "You're sure about what you found, right?" he asked, his voice low. Emma nodded, trying to steady her breath. "Yes, it's Michael. He's been working with Marco, feeding them information." But she trailed off, unsure how to express the nagging doubt in her mind. Vincenzo raised an eyebrow, his patience thinning. "But what?" Emma took a deep breath. "There's more to this. Michael didn't act alone. Whoever is behind this has been planning for a long time. Michael's just the pawn." Vincenzo's gaze hardened, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "I've known for a while that someone was trying to bring me down from the inside. I just didn't want to believe it was someone I trusted." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But now we have to act. We can't waste any more time. I need to know who's really behind this." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I'll find out," she said, determination flooding her voice. Vincenzo's eyes softened, just for a moment. "I'm counting on you, Emma. You've already proven yourself more than capable. But be careful. There's no telling who else is involved, and we can't trust anyone." The words hung in the air, a warning that only made Emma more determined. She had already put her trust in Vincenzo, and now, she was more committed than ever to uncovering the truth. She would stop at nothing to protect him and everything he had built. Vincenzo's empire wasn't just his. Now, it was hers too. Later that evening, as the mansion grew quiet, Emma found herself alone in the study, the documents spread out before her like pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. The weight of Vincenzo's words lingered in her mind, but she knew there was no turning back. She had to find the missing piece. As she sifted through the papers, something caught her eye, a name she hadn't seen before. It was buried deep within the financial records, hidden beneath layers of code and transactions. But it was there. The name was familiar, and it sent a shockwave through her. It was someone close to Vincenzo's inner circle, someone she hadn't considered. She quickly cross-referenced the name with everything she had gathered. and the truth hit her like a tidal wave. It wasn't just Michael. It wasn't just Marco. The real mastermind was someone Emma had never suspected. The name she had found belonged to someone she thought was an ally, someone Vincenzo trusted with his life. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had ever experienced. She was facing not just a fight for power, but a battle against those who had been feeding off Vincenzo's empire from within. As Emma stared at the evidence before her, her mind raced with the enormity of what she had uncovered. She had trusted this person, worked alongside them. Now, she had to face the truth. She was about to confront someone who had been playing a dangerous game, and the stakes had never been higher. Without wasting a moment, she grabbed her phone and called Vincenzo. The phone rang twice before he picked up. His voice, usually steady and calm, had a hint of tension when he answered. "Emma," he said. "What is it?" "Vincenzo, I found something," Emma said, her voice urgent. "It's not just Michael and Marco. There's someone else involved. Someone close to you, someone you've trusted for a long time." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Who?" Vincenzo asked, his tone sharp. Emma hesitated, trying to steady her breath. It's your cousin, Alessandro." The name fell from her lips like a curse, the weight of it crushing her. Vincenzo's silence was deafening, and Emma could hear the tension crackling in the background. "Are you sure?" Vincenzo's voice was low, controlled, but there was a dangerous edge to it. Emma nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I've found the evidence. The transactions, the secret meetings. Alessandro has been working with Marco. He's been feeding information to them from the inside." Vincenzo didn't speak for a moment, but when he did, his voice was colder than ice. "I should have known. I should have seen it. Alessandro has always been ambitious." Emma's heart raced as she heard the bitterness in Vincenzo's voice. She had never imagined he would be betrayed by someone so close to him. "We need to act fast," Emma said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Alessandro won't stop until he's taken everything from you." Vincenzo's response was quick, the decision already made. "We confront him. Tonight." The words were final, the plan set in motion. Emma's stomach twisted with nerves, but she wasn't about to back down. She had already come this far. The fight was just beginning, and she would stand by Vincenzo, no matter what it took. As they made their way to the meeting, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the lion's den. But she had no choice. She couldn't let Alessandro win. Not when so much was at stake. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. The door clicked shut behind Emma and Vincenzo as they stepped into the dimly lit office, the tension thick in the air. Alessandro was standing by the window, his back to them, gazing out over the city as if nothing in the world could touch him. But Emma knew better. The betrayal ran deeper than she had ever imagined, and now it was time for the truth to come out. Vincenzo didn't waste a second. He walked toward Alessandro with steady, purposeful steps, his eyes locked on his cousin. "I know everything, Alessandro," Vincenzo said, his voice low but filled with undeniable authority. Alessandro stiffened, though he didn't turn around right away. "You've always been a little too clever for your own good," Vincenzo continued, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. "Feeding information to Marco, setting everything up from the inside. You were never loyal, were you?" The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of betrayal. Alessandro slowly turned to face them, a thin, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Loyalty," he echoed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Vincenzo, you've built your empire on blood, on fear, on control. And you think I owe you loyalty? I did what was necessary. I did what you couldn't do." Emma felt the anger rising in Vincenzo, but he held it in check, his eyes cold, calculating. "You've always been more ambitious than I thought," Vincenzo said, his voice unwavering. "But you crossed a line, Alessandro. You betrayed me, and for that, there's no going back." Alessandro's smile faltered, but his confidence remained. "Betrayed you," he repeated. "I was trying to save you. I was trying to save all of us. You're stuck in the past, Vincenzo. You're too stubborn to see what's really happening. The world is changing, and you're losing control." Vincenzo took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't about the world changing. This is about you taking advantage of my trust, of everything I've built. You're a coward, hiding behind false ideals, playing both sides." Alessandro's expression shifted for a moment, the first sign of doubt flickering in his eyes. But it quickly disappeared, replaced with a sharp, cold edge. You think I'm the only one playing both sides? He asked, his voice low. You've surrounded yourself with people who would betray you in an instant. You just can't see it because you're too busy being the king. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. Enough, he said, his voice suddenly hard, commanding. You've said your piece, now you'll listen to mine. This is over. You're done. Emma could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The finality in Vincenzo's words was undeniable. Alessandro had been exposed. There was no escaping the truth anymore. Vincenzo reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the desk toward Alessandro. Everything you've done, all the evidence, it's all right here, Vincenzo said, his voice cold. You've played your hand, and now the game is over. Alessandro looked down at the folder, his eyes scanning the documents inside. The color drained from his face as the reality of his betrayal hit him all at once. He had underestimated Vincenzo. He had thought he could outsmart him, but now, it was clear that Vincenzo had always been one step ahead. You've always been a step ahead, haven't you? Alessandro said, his voice barely a whisper, a hint of something dark in his tone. Vincenzo didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, watching his cousin, the man who had once been so close to him, now broken by his own arrogance. You should have known better, Alessandro, Vincenzo said finally, his voice filled with quiet anger. You had everything you ever wanted, and you threw it all away. Alessandro looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and regret. You're right, he said, his voice shaking slightly. But I couldn't stay in your shadow forever. I wanted more. Vincenzo shook his head, a disappointed expression crossing his face. That's the problem, he said, his voice quieter now. You always wanted more, but you didn't understand what it meant to build something real. To earn it. Alessandro's eyes flashed with something close to rage. And you think you've built something real? He spat. You think your empire is untouchable? It's all a house of cards, Vincenzo. You just don't see it. Vincenzo stepped forward, his eyes hard as steel. You'll never understand, Alessandro, he said, his voice low but filled with certainty. Because you don't know what it means to truly build. You don't know what it means to protect what you've worked for. Alessandro stood silent, his shoulders sagging, as if the weight of everything he had done had finally come crashing down on him. Vincenzo turned to Emma then, his eyes softening slightly. You were right about everything, Emma, he said, his voice quieter. I couldn't have done this without you. You've proven yourself more than anyone ever could. Emma stood still, her heart racing. She had never imagined this moment. But as she looked at Vincenzo, she knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more challenges ahead, but with Vincenzo by her side, she was ready to face them. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would win. We've won this battle, Vincenzo said, his gaze turning back to Alessandro. But the war is far from over. And I won't stop until we've crushed every last threat to this empire. Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. The end of one chapter had arrived, but the next was already beginning. There was no going back now. In this thrilling chapter of our romance stories, betrayal and loyalty collide in a world filled with power, danger, and undeniable passion. Follow Emma as she navigates the dark side of love and ambition, uncovering hidden secrets that threaten to destroy everything she holds dear. As the story unfolds, you will be taken on a wild ride, filled with unexpected twists and intense moments of emotional conflict. The stakes are high, and the choices Emma makes could change her life forever. In this gripping narrative, we dive deep into the complexities of love, trust, and betrayal, making it one of the most captivating romance stories you'll ever hear. With dangerous enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Emma's journey is just beginning. Can she overcome the odds and find redemption? Or will the weight of her decisions drag her into a world of darkness from which there is no return? The tension in this romance story builds as we explore how far people will go for power, control, and love. Emma's story isn't just a tale of betrayal. It's a journey of self-discovery, strength, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As each chapter unravels, the romance stories you've come to love take on a new, thrilling dimension, pushing the boundaries of trust and loyalty in ways you've never imagined. Don't miss out on this epic tale of passion, drama, and betrayal. Get ready for the next chapter in this unforgettable saga of love and revenge.